to now introduce Pete. Pete, this is actually my first time meeting you. I've done a lot of research and learned a lot about you. So I'm sure excited to hear. We're going out with a bang here. So welcome, Pete. Please introduce yourself and the floor is yours.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for having me. And Tommy, thanks for the invitation. I know you're on the line as well. Let me start off by saying this. I have never served in the fire service. I'm not in the law enforcement. I am not any kind of first responder, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about some shared experiences that you and I may have in the audience. We're going to be talking about culture today, and that probably doesn't sound like the most exciting topic you've ever heard about, but we're going to describe it in some ways that maybe you haven't discussed it before. I define culture as the gas, the glue, and the guardrails of an organization, whether it's a fire department, whether it's a church, whether it's a business, you name it. And the gas is what moves us forward. The glue is what brings us together. And the guardrails are, frankly, what you use just in case you're nearing an accident. You want to protect against those as well. So let me jump into my presentation. This is going to take just a second. I know you guys do difficult things at all times, and you're going to watch me hopefully getting this right from a technological standpoint. Let's see how this goes. I'm going to shift over to my presentation now. And in just a second, the magic is going to happen. I sure hope it happens. It is moving. There we go. All right. So far, so good. All right. So we're going to be talking about fireproofing. And that is what I describe as that multifaceted protection that you want to have within your organization. Protection for you, protection for your department, protection for your culture. Because the culture is the thing that can guide you. And if you've been in bad ones, you know what I mean. It can guide you down the wrong direction, but a good one can keep you safe and heading in the right direction. If you ever want to reach out to me, I am not from Hawaii. I live in Dallas, Texas. All my information is there, as with the other speakers. And you see my link in the chat section. Sign up with me on there. Would love to connect with you. I put a lot on social media, and that's the way I've built a lot of relationships around the fire community, the police community, and all sorts of folks that know a thing or two about being in some challenging cultures. What are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be talking about your, what I believe is your greatest strength and can be at times your greatest weakness. That is your culture. Culture is defined as those beliefs, standards, basic understandings of how stuff works within your organization, what you believe. Let me toss out one more definition, and that is cultures can be defined by what is the worst behavior your organization is willing to tolerate. And at times, that is what gets you in the newspapers. We're talking to the PIOs in just a minute, hearing from them. They were talking about, social media. Social media is that double-edged sword. Culture is that double-edged sword as well. We're going to be talking about arsonists. Yeah, you're listening to a guy. I spent my career in politics and political consulting, but I can tell you I understand quite a bit about arsonists, not the type you've dealt with, but the type that frankly burn down stuff inside of organizations. Not surprisingly, a lot of crimes are committed, sometimes solo, but sometimes they have accomplices. We'll talk about those as well. We're going to talk about risks. You guys navigate risks every day when you're fighting a blaze. We're going to be talking about some risks inside your culture. And then we're going to be talking about a bunch of things that I think, frankly, you as leaders, as supervisors, as people that move people in certain directions, the things you can do to make your life easier and make their lives easier. So let's get to it. Let's start with a term that I have a feeling you're familiar with. At some point you were trained on, and that is flashovers. That is sometimes some of your scariest moments are preparing for those, which means you're spending some time understanding what the risks are, what the elements look like of something going very bad to you, perhaps to your organization. Flashovers is the kind of that flashpoint, if you will, of things going wrong. But within your culture, you're going to see some things going wrong as well. We're going to talk about what some of those are in just a moment. So why am I here? why the heck did they bring in a political consultant, a lobbyist, or a guy that spent most of his career doing that, talking to you great folks? Like I said, we share some things in common, and you're about to hear my story. And if I don't explain it well enough, I'll point out some of those common areas of interest that we have. But frankly, all of us want a workplace that where we can feel trust, where we can feel respect, where our surroundings are as safe as possible, where we feel like our career is headed in the right direction, and then we trust the people above us, and the people that report to us understand what their job is and what success looks like. So why am I here? I'm going to keep it really brief. I do training sessions of up to 8 hours, so I'm not going to go into all of it. But I tell in my book, it's called The Arsonist in the Office, my story of entering a new job. Needed to find a job. I found one, and I cared about two things. I cared about my pay, and I cared about my benefits. Really, everything else had been great up until that point. I didn't have to worry about anything. I had fantastic managers, leaders, good cultures, no problem. So I walked into another situation that seemed just like that. But within a couple of days, and I talk about some of the warning signals I began to see in those first 48 hours, the third day was the kicker. I got called into my CEO's office, who explained to me that he had not told me everything he needed to in the job. Frankly, he apologized to me and said, "You probably wouldn't have taken this role if I had told you what I'm about to say." And that is, I had been hired to work with the employee that at that point had filed between 2 and 3 dozen false complaints within the organization. They had investigated, so that they knew they were false. They said 2 to 3 dozen complaints because, well, frankly, he told me they had stopped counting. There had been allegations of all sorts of different wrongdoing within the organization that this employee had made. They had made threats against the organization. I was told that they were blackmailing various people within the organization's leadership. There had been leaks of information. There had been leaks that had led to investigations, all sorts of different things going on. And I asked the basic question, why is that person still here? And I was told it's complicated, and we really can't go into all of it, but we've made some calculations. And the calculations were based on this. They had more fear of what this person might do from the outside to the organization than what, if they kept an eye on them, what they might do on the inside. The person I just described was truly one of the greatest threats to the success of the organization. But leadership had made some risks to protect themselves, to protect their friends, to protect people in high power positions in and around the organization, to protect them, but truly not protect their culture, their employees, or anything else. He told me a story that he explained to me, and this is where the arsonist theme comes in. He said there had been a volunteer fire department that years ago had X number of fires, and that particular year, they had about 3 times the number of fires. The leaders within that county began asking around, saying, is this climate change that's causing this? Do we need to do better perhaps about educating people on the dangerous flammables that are out there? Maybe we're not disposing of them well enough. What's going on? So they asked a few questions to the schools, to elected officials. They finally got around to the fire department. And that's where feet really began being put to the fire being put to the feet of the people in power there. And there had been lots of fires being set. Those fires started with a meeting that was held within the department where one of the leaders expressed that, well, we're not going to get any more trucks, any more cool equipment out of our organization if there aren't more fires. Well, people began asking the questions. Well, Chief, hey, if we need more fires, I've got a friend of mine whose pizza shop is going bankrupt. Maybe they wouldn't mind having a fire. I bet they'd like the insurance check. Somebody else chiming in with, I've got this neighbor down the street. He's a jerk. I think if we lit his shed on fire, that'd make me happy, and that would add one more to our numbers. And other people saying, count me in. I love setting fires, and I love the pats on the back that we get when we go to the county month after month to hear from them on how we're doing. love that that adulation that we get. And so they began asking around and around at that point how they were going to build the number of fires. And eventually the question got turned on the fire department, and people flipped, and they learned that a couple things out of that. Number one, the fires were being set by the police department. But number two, the biggest thing that was coming out of that, they learned that the people that were there to bring order, to bring safety to the organization, were actually the ones that were bringing the biggest problems forward. And ladies and gentlemen, as I share with you today, and we're going to be talking about arsonists in a minute, you will learn that arsonists have many motives. Definitely the ones we see that light fires out in the forests that get so much publicity this time of year and other times of year around the country and around the world. But they have other motives. Sometimes it's cover up. They're lighting a fire over here so that they're not seen over here, or they're wanting to destroy evidence of something they've done. Sometimes we've got folks that have the superhero complex. They love getting that pat on the back and being told how great they are because, frankly, they put out the fires that they themselves started. Other folks have financial motives. Those kind of arsonists may be looking to get your promotion and doing all the wrong things to the culture, to the standards of the organization, to make sure that their interests are respected and focused on, not the actions of everybody else. Then you've got the attention hounds and the adrenaline junkies, people that just love setting those fires and love being seen doing something out there. You ever worked with anybody like this? Those, ladies and gentlemen, as you may know, and I bet we have some arson experts in the audience, arson experts being the kind that put fires out and investigate arson. Those are all the key motives that the U.S. Fire Administration says tend to be the motives of arsonists in the criminal sense, but also in the workplace sense. They can cause you lots of problems. But really, one of the bigger problems you will find in any arson situation is at times they get help. There are accomplices. Sometimes there are copycats, as you know, people that see bad behavior taking place and either decide to not do anything, add fuel to the fire, or perhaps they want to light a fire of their own. Cecil, I talked about my CEO. He was one of the true accomplices. In fact, you could say he burned things down himself. He was an awfully nice guy. He could carry a conversation like few people could. He'd pat you on the back. He'd make you feel good coming out of any type of meeting. But when he decided that an employee was untouchable, he institutionalized bad behavior. I'm not going to go into it today, but I could tell you story after story of people that looked at what Cecil, the CEO, did in terms of saying that the arsonist, we don't have time to go into the full story, but that the arsonist was going to be protected from termination. Sent signals to everyone, and as you can imagine, I think that management style is called "hold my beer," because people would look at what had been done and say, "I could top that," or "I've decided I can get away with X amount of bad behavior," and it only takes a few. Not everybody is led in that direction, but all it takes is a few people looking at the signals leadership is sending or not saying to create their own bad behavior. Cecil didn't train managers. He just didn't believe in it, believed that the people that were good in their jobs would be good in any type of job. And I would tell you, if you are putting people in management leadership positions that don't love people, that don't like leading people, that don't believe in your core values of your department, you've got a problem. Because in that void of leadership creates new people that want to vie for leadership. And folks that are in fire leadership on this call, or whether you plan to get up to those rungs on the ladder at some point, I will tell you, you are responsible for the culture. And if you are not taking the responsibility that you have for the culture, somebody else is going to weasel their way into those spots. But he didn't believe on training managers. He acted in his own self-interests. He talked about protecting himself in all sorts of different ways changing the ladder, changing the organizational chart to make sure he wasn't coming under attack from the employee that he called the arsonist. He created multiple sets of rules, and that created friction within the organization. But there was a second accomplice, and this was a very nice one. Her name was Susie. She was my supervisor, and she had been thrown the task of dealing with Hazel. Cecil had passed her off to Susie, who had come under attack previously from the arsonist. It was a difficult situation. It was nearly impossible if you had not had training, but also impossible because the organization had set clear standards that they were not going to be removing the difficult, trouble-ridden employee, and that created problems of its own. How do you discipline somebody if you have all the different tools taken away? She as well worried about her own interests above those of the organization's success. She and Cecil, the CEO, would talk constantly about their retirement packages above all else. And I will tell you this, you guys, more than anyone, as well as folks in law enforcement, y'all make the sacrifice you do on the front end to get rewarded richly on the back end. And I do not fault any leader, anyone for that. But I will say, if you look so far out into the distance, your vision becomes very blurry for what's right in front of you. Looking out too far, not worrying about the problems that you may have right in front of you, can cause other problems. And these two found themselves in situation after situation that there was a fire going on throughout the organization, and they were more worried about getting out than putting out the fire. And for leadership, that creates lots of problems. Well, what did I see? We're not going to go into all of it today. We only have so much time. But I saw retaliation and intimidation taking place frequently. Saw bad behavior excused, and that infuriated the people that I would call the rank and file employees, mid-level employees, who watched their good acts being ignored and watched the bad behavior being excused. We saw gossip, constant. Why? Mostly because leadership's messages were no longer trusted. People were trying to infer or translate anything they could get out of the organization because they frankly didn't trust the word of any of the characters within it. We saw micromanagement, people doing their best to become any type of leader that would be useful, but they didn't have good examples around them. As a result of that, they went with whatever example they had seen in the past and brought that into the organization, which created all sorts of different standards and frustrations for employees at all levels. That caused some people to leave, other people just to get fed up and become what I call zombies within the organization, people that felt burned by all sorts of different parts of what was happening within the organization, burned by the bad behavior, and frankly wanted out. Then I would see multiple sets of rules, different rules for different people, causes people to check out. Communication goes down when that happens. Then I would also see frequently a combination of silence and screaming. Let me ask you this real quickly, and welcome your thoughts in the chat section. As a leader, which one of these two would bother you most? Silence or screaming? Give me a little bit of a take on that. See any responses out there. All right, I don't see anything yet, but I would tell you one of the things I want you to get out of today. Yeah, to see Caswell Todd mentioned silence. Silence needs, and all communication needs to, frankly, be on the top of your radar screen. Y'all understand working in a firehouse. Y'all understand reading people. Understand, you're working closely with people 24 hours a day. Understanding changes in behavior and understanding how that behavior, frankly, can manifest itself in all sorts of different ways. But silence or lack of communication, that's going to be one of your canaries in the coal mine, your warning signs for you. What I watched in an organization, and you all put these out, and I would encourage you to put them out today, is what I call a cultural dumpster fire. It starts with leadership, it flows down to management, and it ends up with employees. You have weak leadership that's looking at protecting themselves, focused on them, and you have the people right below them check out that aren't getting the messages, that aren't being put in positions to succeed. And then from there, if the management is frustrated, sure as heck the employees are going to be frustrated too. A rudderless ship isn't going to get anywhere on purpose. And when that happens, communication channels die from there. And that is how you get, you look at scandal after scandal after scandal. That's how things emerge. We were talking about putting out fires in the last segment when y'all were talking about social media, wanting to make sure you're telling your story. But if your organization isn't telling its story within, it's sure not telling its story from the outside. So what do you do with this? I would encourage you to be that leader who is daring to lead. That means deciding what your values are, and that means bringing it down throughout your organization, talking about what you believe constantly, that your employees understand it, your management understands it, adding those to what you're talking about. You're telling a story, frankly. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is how we're going to get there types of discussion. So you're deciding what you're talking about. You're repeating it regularly. And when your values are challenged at a highly serious and potentially destructive level, you need to enforce. So the D is for deciding, A is for adding it to everything, R is for repeating, E is for enforcing everything that you do. But if you're not being the right type of leader, and you can change from the type of leader you've been, if you're looking at this today and saying, wow, I sound a lot like Cecil that he described, or maybe Susie, you need to figure out what kind of leader you want to be. One of four types I want to talk about when dealing with problems. You're going to have one of these four as a possibility for dealing with those challenges that frankly can bring down your career or bring down everything you built. First one is arsonist, that person that's literally setting things on fire within an organization. Can cause a lot of friction, a lot of problems, a lot of lost careers, a lot of things that you don't want going on under your watch. You've got the runners. I would tell you, as somebody who's never put out fires, that has had no training in the fire service and has no tools, at times this can look pretty appealing to somebody if they don't know what they're doing. But you guys, y'all as firefighters, y'all know exactly what to do when a fire is coming at you, or you have the training to figure it out. You have the tools, you have the reservoir of water to deal with the problem in front of you. You don't want it to spread. Runners, they're looking out for themselves. Runners in leadership, if they're running from the situation, they frankly are some of the few people that can take on certain problems. Hiring and firing are tools of leadership. Dealing with problems, training and enforcing. Those are all sorts of things that leaders and management can handle that the average employee cannot. And if you want to be the type of leader who's going to address problems, put out fires, runner isn't for you. And then finally, we've got the apprentice, that person that looks the other way and says, you know what, I have X number of years until I'm out of here. I'm not touching that hot potato. I'm not going near that third rail. I'm not going to worry about that one. I'll kick the can down the road and let somebody else take this on. And I would say this, I want you to remember this today. And if you write down nothing else that I have to say, write this down. If you condone it, you own it, which means if you know that there's a serious problem within your organization and you decide willfully to say, I'm not taking that on, you are enabling bad behavior. In fact, you're probably multiplying bad behavior within your organization, and you're showing a weakness. So if any of these things sound not too appetizing for you, think about what type of leader you want to be. And frankly, and we'll get to it, let me give you a slide. I encourage you to be the firefighter. That person that sees the issues, sees those fires, and is trained, equipped, and has the understanding to put them out. I'll tell you this, I speak to a ton of police chief groups and police departments around the country. They're never thrilled with this slide, not at all. They do not want to be compared to firefighters, but I tell them there is a place and there is heroism with that person that wants to put out the blaze, because at times there's a heck of a lot of risk to dealing with some of the big issues out there. Sometimes those are political, sometimes they're legal, sometimes they are things where you look at it and think, you know what, if there's nobody else to take this on, it's going to be me. It's my time. It's my leadership that's being challenged here. I need to be ready to take this one on. So I would encourage you. You are the firefighter. Be ready to be the firefighter within your culture. Let's talk about FLARP. FLARP is something. It is an acronym I use. It comes from an experience that when my daughter was 6 years old, she brought some of the most disgusting, silly putty kind of stuff into our house. It was smelly. It was slimy. It was just disgusting on every level, and it was called FLARP. And I was writing my book. I'm 50 years old now, so I'm constantly looking for crutches that are going to help me remind myself of the meanings of things, of lists of things. Can I get an amen on that from anybody that's dealing with that in the audience? You need every bit of help you can get. FLARP is my sign, my crutch for all the bad behaviors that affect organizations. They are financial. F is for financial. L is for legal. A is for attracting and retaining employees. R is for reputational. P is for productivity. P is for a few things: productivity, physical health, and psychological health. All of these different things, when a culture is going badly, you've got many of these problems popping up, sometimes simultaneously. We're going to go through a few of these examples. Again, if we were training for a day, we'd be walking through some absolutely amazing examples of where, frankly, when things go wrong, they go really off the rails kind of wrong. Those fires get out of control. F is for financial. Anyone remember the Boeing scandal from recent years? It comes with from the 737 MAX, which was going to be the huge, big, new, shiny toy that Boeing had, and they were going to be selling billions and billions worth of dollars worth of these 737 MAXs. They had them ordered throughout the world. We're beginning to have them up in the air until they weren't up in the air. Those planes began crashing in various parts of the world. In the southeast, Southeast Earth, in Indonesia and Malaysia, they crashed. 2 crashes killed several hundred people, which took those planes out of production. The FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, shut down the flying of them. Airlines took them out of service to find out what's going on. In the end, we're not going to go through the whole story, but it came down to this. When Congress investigated, after all the everything was pulled in terms of emails and texts and all those embarrassing things that constantly bring up the really bad stuff in scandals, the congressional investigation said this: there was a culture of cover-up, culture of people, frankly, who saw problems that didn't want to talk about them, that were afraid of what was going to happen to them, what was going to happen to their careers, whether they were going to be bullied and intimidated if they said, hey, our software has a big issue, or no, I don't think it's a good idea that we don't provide training and simulation services for this plane because the software is showing problems and people need to understand what's going on. As a result of that, lots of things went badly in that culture, but it all came back to what Congress called the culture of concealment. People at all levels of the organization wanting the best for the organization, but deceiving people to get it done. Pressure within organizations causes people to do things they would never do. Good people can do very bad things when a culture has problems. Legal. This is an example that could be repeated throughout the country, but I'll pick a department in Nebraska that's had some challenges recently. And I would tell you this, and I constantly tell audiences, learn from your mistakes, learn from other people's mistakes. The Lincoln, Nebraska Fire Department, I'm sure, made up of fine people, great leaders at all levels of their department, but they have had multiple lawsuits now into the millions of dollars on the issue of retaliation. People have been retaliated against Juries have put forward verdicts, and it's happening again and again and again. And I would say to you, as people, especially, and we talked about retaliation a little bit earlier, intimidation, bullying, all these different things we're going to get to over the next few minutes. There is a price to pay if you don't learn lessons, and if you're not taking what courts are handing you, what elected officials are handing to you, and learning lessons from it. When they face the first lawsuit, there should have been something put out throughout the organization saying, guys, we need to change our ways on this. People that were targeted within that lawsuit, you need to clean up your act. Send down the rules that this is not going to be tolerated. And if you do it, you're gone, or you're going to be sanctioned, or you're going to be demoted, or whatever is going to cause the behavior to change. They did not. Again, this could be repeated by numerous departments around the country. Folks in Nebraska got it today. Attracting and keeping employees. Here's a few numbers to think about. 54% of people say that if you put someone in that toxic, bad behavior type of situation at work, they are 54% more likely than the average person to go out and put out their resume, try to find a new job. I know this may vary in your field, given that people want to get to the end, to the retirement benefits, et cetera, but it makes people look for options. And you can take that any way you want to, but that's a number for you. 60% of people say that they have left a job because of bad treatment by a manager. And if you're not training your people to be managers, to be lovers of people, to understand that even if you're called a supervisor, you're truly a leader, you're putting your organization at risk. And finally, 59% of managers say they've never been trained to manage, never been trained to lead. Those numbers should scare you. You've got a lot of risk there, especially in these days as hiring is more challenging. To find those people that can fill those jobs, to get good people to fill those jobs, you need to have leaders that are going to invest in them the second they get in there. You want those people to stay that 5 year, 10 years, have it become just part of who they are to stay within those roles for a long time. Capital One, real quick. Capital One, big banking institution. I'm sure y'all have seen their commercials at some point before, but they were known for cybersecurity, and they were doing great until they hired somebody in their cybersecurity department that was a toxic leader. That caused many of their employees to clear out, to move on to other opportunities because they didn't want to be there at that point. Capital One, at that point, when their employee retention in cybersecurity was the worst at its height, that's when one of the largest data breaches in financial services history took place. Hit Capital One. Yes, it can affect your ability to function, your readiness levels. Think about that when you're looking at who's going to lead your most important teams. Reputation. Look at all these pretty faces. Who to pick? We've got 3 of them here. I would say let's go with Ellen DeGeneres. Anyone familiar with what her tagline was on every show? All right, y'all are busy putting out fires. You're not familiar with Ellen DeGeneres' show, but her tagline was "Be kind," telling everybody, "You be kind to everyone." End of the show. That was her exhortation to everybody in the audience to be kind to others. And then we find out when her staff starts leaking like a sieve that there was indication after indication that she was a toxic mess and was causing all sorts of problems and bullying of her staff, of her production crew, of anybody that she came in contact with. Essentially, her reputation, her celebrity was based on that kindness. And as it turned out, Ellen wasn't so kind. Andrew Cuomo, he was big shot when it came to the Me Too movement, which really is inconvenient when you were presiding over a major sexual harassment activity within your own office. It knocked him out of office most recently, as some of you may be familiar with. And in our house, not by me, but by my wife, we watch plenty of Hallmark Movie Channel, where Lori Loughlin, the actress on the left, was seen as the sweet, innocent actress, which worked out really great in her acting career. She looks the part, But then it turns out she was in the middle of the college admission scandal that hit a bunch of other celebrities. She served time. Did not end well for her. York, South Carolina Fire Department. Y'all were talking about social media. Here's a social media mess. And it was a fire chief that was recently fired. This was middle of last year. Now he had created his own social media policies of no misuse should be taking place, and he was violating it very badly, very inappropriately, if you get my drift. If we had hours, I'd show you the rest of the article, but it was bad. It was embarrassing. And he, in a very, very high profile way, damaged his reputation forever by one, violating his own policies, two, having lots of dirty laundry dragged out, but three, when his people pushed back at the city leadership that said he needed to be gone, he rallied them to support him and betrayed them in many, many ways. I would tell you, as a leader, if you're not watching your reputation and you don't have people that are holding you accountable, find some. It happens to leaders constantly that they get cocky and they run into trouble when it happens. Productivity. Study by Harvard Business School said that 50% of people that are in toxic situations are going to show decreased effort in what they do. 66% show their performance declines. But I want you to look at the second and fourth ones on this list. 25% of people in toxic environments take their frustrations out on customers. Let's change that to colleagues. Or this fourth one here, the 78% commitment to employer declines. Why don't we say commitment to your job? Commitment when you're put into a difficult situation and frankly, you don't care as much about the duties of protecting others as you used to. This can have serious ramifications, folks. Then on health in another way. Again, I apologize for moving quickly, but we've got so much good stuff to go through today. Physical health, 2 studies basically saying if folks are suffering under bad leadership, bad management, they're usually 60% more likely to have heart problems than the average person. I want you guys to have a great setup in terms of your culture. There's ways to make it better, but I want you to understand what happens on the bad side when that's not done. What does it look like from a psychological standpoint? Going to pick just a few of these out. Put somebody in a uber toxic situation, uncontrolled emotions, hopelessness, detachment, perhaps even suicidal. You don't want these things in your workforce. You don't want them in incidents. You sure don't want them with the individual who is suffering from depression and potentially suicidal thoughts. You just don't want it. One more reason to get your culture in place. So how do you do that? We're going to go through these quickly, and then we're going to move on to questions and any thoughts that you might have. But I encourage you from a hiring standpoint, from a management and leadership standpoint, focus on something that kind of gets laughed off at times, and that is teaching your people what your mission is. And if you need to hone it, if you need to get into a few sentences so you yourself can remember it, that's fine, do it. But mission focuses you. You're going to find this next generation, we're going to talk about them in a minute. The generation that we've got today, the Generation Zers and the millennials, they're focused on the why of the job, the purpose-driven life part of the job. That goes into the vision as well, what you want to do with this place, why they should be there. Let them understand what the big picture is on getting these things accomplished. We're going to talk about fireproofing cultures real quick. A few things that go into that in a big way. 4 things, actually. Some SWOT analysis. Finding out what's going on within your culture. If you've been there for a while, I think you're going to know some of the challenges, and you can look at those. You can develop strategies for how you make things better. You can look and take some hard analysis of what communication is like within your organization and try and figure out why there's the gaps. You go through that DARE process that I talked about. But here's 2 things that you need to understand very well. You as a top leader within an organization, or you, somebody that may want to lead a department one day, you got to be ready to make the hardest of decisions. And one of those things is, if it ever gets to this point, and this is a true test of the culture, as hard as it is, as uncomfortable as it is, that if violations are so grave within your organization, no one is left out of taking the blame for that. If you've got an arsonist in your organization that is truly burning down everything around you, you need to make that tough call. And if not, you may not be prepared to have to take on the toughest things in leadership. And finally, understanding policy is people, people is policy. And if you're putting people in bad spots that they're ill-equipped for, that's that hurts the manager that's put in that spot, but it also hurts the leader and everybody else in the organization. Real quickly, we're going to talk about a few points on these, a lot on employee feedback, leadership things, and then winning hearts and minds and bad apples. Let's go quickly. We talked about management, but I want to urge you to look at a few different things on here. The team and bridge builders part, that's an essential part of that middle level of management. You're bringing down the information that you're getting from leadership, assuming you are, and bringing that down to the other levels and holding them accountable for educating the people that are in the rank and file part of your organization, the new hires, getting them immersed in the culture. You're the implementers of cultural education. Management, here we go. We talked about the millennials, and we're going to talk about Gen Z. They ask questions. You may hate it, but understand they're going to question everything. They are going to ask for detailed instruction. Look at it as a plus. Less screw ups that way. They want to have relationships. Look on this slide here. They want relationships. Ask questions. Be prepared to answer a lot of questions. And you're going to have a strong communication channel that's going to give you a few different things. That communication, it's going to be potentially good intel for you if there's a problem. It's going to be key to get younger staff involved and understanding of what the mission is. That's going to make them want to stay around longer. It's going to create potentially some new leaders, and it's going to build innovation. It's going to be a competitive advantage for you in hiring, because when people know this is a place where the younger generation that you need to hire now, you're going to want them to know about the culture. Social media is going to play a key to that. And finally, talking about winning hearts and minds means being present, means showing up places you sometimes don't, maybe on shifts that you are usually asleep for. Show up, show you care, and always make your walk match your talk. Hypocrisy is one of the most dangerous things within a culture. And frankly, it's one of the things that makes your life the most simple. Understand that when you lead your culture, you got to follow it as well, but it's going to be one of the best things that happens for your people. Bad apples, understand that consistency and timeliness matters in a big way. And then finally, and we're going to take just a minute on this, I would encourage you, tell your story. If you hate public speaking, understand that to get to the next level, it may take public speaking. It is going to take going on social media. And when you get those tens of thousands of follows on social media, you're going to understand how big a deal it is and how big a tool you have to deal with it, to address misconceptions, to educate people about the value you bring, both personally as well as through your organization. Blind spots, understand if you've got a problem listening, whether you think whether you're a little too big for your britches, whether you feel bulletproof in your job, that kind of cockiness, those kind of poor listening skills can make you very vulnerable. I want to protect you here and make you understand that. And then asking about what those blind spots are. Ask your spouse, ask your coworkers that you trust, look at patterns in your life and problems that keep on popping up. And then finally, training and holding the standards, understanding your culture, learning from your mistakes on why you're making them, and what you can learn from your mistakes and other people's mistakes, and to be that cultural leader. It is huge to protecting your organization if you're standing up as that person that's leading it and saying, here's where we are, here's where we're going, and I want to make your career in this department stronger. If they don't hear that clarity, they're going to look for it from somebody, and it's got to be you. That fireproof leader, you're going to get better intel. Your team is going to stay longer. You're going to have fewer scandals, lower risk, and you're going to know when to act. Why? Because you've been saying it for years. It is the truly protected leader that it's not foolproof. Anything can burn down with the right kind of fire. But I would tell you, it is exactly what your organizations at this time in society you need to have. Ladies and gentlemen, my pleasure to be here with you today. Happy to take any questions you might have. If you want my book, The Arsonist in the Office, it's available at Amazon, Kindle, Audible, all that good stuff. And again, thanks for having me, and happy to take any questions. And Kevin, sorry, I am late. 2 minutes
No,
long.
no, you were just perfect. Little round of applause for myself and the audience. So we got a couple questions here, and I encourage everyone. We're in the waking hours, kind of the golden hour here of the presentation, and it just had an awesome conversation with Pete. So thank you for that. I'll just start firing off questions that I have. First one from the audience: how does an organization recover when a great leader leaves? When everything starts to crumble, members stop showing up for calls and training nights. What happens when it seems like everything maybe goes wrong when said leader leaves?
Yeah. And a few things. And this, of course, if we were to roll back the tape, it also talks about why why it's so essential to have that next man up, next woman up philosophy to make sure you're equipping all levels of the department. But if you don't have that leader, ideally you need to identify it, and that leader needs to step up through visibility, through frankly showing people who they are. It becomes awkward at times when that person becomes a chief, or taking on a new leadership level within the department, and they're not used to having any type of separation from the rest of the department. They think they're going to lose friends, that they're it's not going to feel the same, and it's not going to feel identical, but there's a lot of good things that can come from it. You're going to learn some new skills, but it takes that person that is willing to step up, take the visibility mantle that they need to, and start taking the good. And there's always a little bit of problems that you need to work on, no matter who the leader is. Develop both of those, take all the good, work on the bad, and move on, because a static culture is a culture that frankly may be the most challenging of all, in that nobody feels like anyone is in charge. Tough to have success under those circumstances with the rudderless ship.
Thanks for that context. And again, I want to encourage people to ask questions while we got Pete here. One question that came up for me was I put up this poll when the conversation was going on about what are some of the most important traits of a leader, maybe the most important trait. And I just threw out 6 adjectives that I thought were important traits. But I thought it was maybe interesting that about 90% of the people chose integrity out of all of them.
Yeah.
Why is integrity, I don't want to say the most, but one of the most important qualities in leadership?
So when I do training, I talk about this study from MIT. Anyway, long story. It talks about, here's 6 different types of leaders you've got, and one, and this term alone will tell you how bad this is. They call it the sociopathic leader. The other is called the chameleon leader. And I ask people, okay, out of these, what do you like? What don't you like? The reaction on the sociopath, obviously, we've all got visions of what that means, but people say on the sociopath, I wouldn't like them. I would hate the experience, but at least I know where they're coming from. With the chameleon, they could be anything at any time, and they're constantly blowing up half the department, or one half the department or the other. And at least I know with the sociopath what direction I'm being hit from. With that leader of integrity, you've got the plus side, that what you're going to get out of them, that they are that person who knows who they are, that they know what they want the department to be, and those huge positives. If you're left with complete uncertainty at all times, nothing good's coming out of that.
Yep. Good.
I saw a question about labor representatives. You want me to jump on these?
Yeah. How involved should labor representatives be?
Let me say this, and frankly, I think it is one of the areas where, and I know there's always going to be friction between labor and management. It just that's the way it works, right? But on benefiting, frankly, the work lives and family lives, because we know we bring stress home at times. accidentally, or it just, we want to talk about it, something like that. If we can get to a point where labor and management can agree on, let's build the best culture possible, where humanly possible. Let's do that as one of the shared things that we can do together. Communication channels, sure. Those there's always going to be give and take on that. The work rules, everything else. But how about respecting the community? To me, that ought to be at the top of labor's agenda. Ought to be at the top of management's agenda. Let's find some commonality on those great things about culture. But here's the other thing. I would also argue that at times, and this is where we all have blind spots, right? Whether it's the CEO who's looking out for his buddy, or the person in a union in leadership that says we look out for all of our guys. And I would say in either situation, if you're ignoring the values of the people you represent and are protecting those that, frankly, because of their actions should not be protected, pox on both the houses on whether it's leadership or unions doing that, because frankly, it drives everybody crazy in the middle. And it's tragic to a culture when that happens. We're seeing that in a story in the Boston Police Department now, where there was cover up. And in this case, it happened to be a union leader that caused problems. But the rank and file is furious at everybody up the food chain, their union leadership as well as the management. And it was an avoidable situation because there were so many people on both sides, labor and management, that knew that something was wrong there. But the old boy system, or whatever you want to call it, that says, you know what, they're one of us, we'll help this go away. Boy, 15 years later, as a trial is about to take place, that's now as much of a trial against the police department as it is against one officer that was a predator, who's now going to be going through a trial. Everybody looks bad, and it infuriates the people that are there to do a good job, take care of their families, and want a job where they're respected.
Thanks, Pete. So we got another question from the audience, and I'll read it to you, and then you can go.
Okay. I was looking off to the side, but I'll listen.
Yeah, all good. So could you discuss subcultures or differing cultures and values across different divisions within your organization? Suppression versus EMS, engine versus truck versus squad, maybe even different geographic regions within your organization. How do you bring them all together?
I think number one, that's going to be the job of if there's one person at the top, guess what? That is their job. I would ask for, if you're seeing fissures in that, there should be one set of values, one set of expectations, one way to treat people, and hopefully all of these are going to be positive things. But I mean, you can't have bullying be rampant throughout emergency personnel and have a good culture elsewhere. It doesn't work. Things break down when there's incidents. If people aren't playing by the same rules and don't have the same expectations of what they're going to get out of leadership, just bad stuff happens from that. I'm working with healthcare entities now that face bullying at certain levels, that the stress pops up in operating rooms. With the stress that you guys are under, the precision that you need, you can't have things taking place in one spot or another and not do something about them. So ultimately it's with leadership, but it's leadership setting one set of goals and then putting people in place that frankly are going to listen and understand that part of their job is to implement that positive culture. If you have lots of different people that think they are playing the leader, it takes somebody who's going to step up and say, we've got one entity here, one culture here, and we're going to be unified in treating our people well and having good values.
Thanks, Pete. Well, I'll give everyone one last minute to ask questions, but in this time, Pete, basically your whole presentation was like a mic drop. So I appreciated all the value bombs you put there, but I want to challenge you. You have 60 seconds, and I want you to leave us with any final comments, questions, or challenge to everyone in the audience.
Oh man, let's see. I would encourage you, as folks that I'm presuming are leaders within your organization, number one, understand your culture for yourself. Cultures can burn you in a lot of ways. If you read my story in my book, you will understand that you don't go writing a book about toxic workplaces just because it's a fun thing to do. I went through an experience that was life-changing for me, but I learned some things that, frankly, you don't learn unless you go through them. So I hope you understand the power of culture to make positive change, but also the challenges of what can go wrong if you don't have strong leadership affecting the culture. You need that type of presence. And finally, and I will leave you with this: my story, my book, the thing that is putting me in front of police and fire leadership organizations and leaders in front of the country, was based on one of the worst experiences of my life. My career imploding. But I would tell you, if you're at the point where you're wanting to give up and frankly, you want to check out for X number of years that you've got left in this job, I want to tell you, out of some of the bad stuff that's bugged you in the past, may create an amazing opportunity. For me, it was writing a book and taking that transformational time to take the worst experience and turn it into something that is putting me in front of groups like y'all today. So thank you so much.
Pete, kudos to you. Thanks for sharing all your wisdom and insight today. And for rounding this out here,